Breaking news. So the House of Representatives just passed a resolution that would place a statue of a woman in Congress.
What?
Dr. Martha Hughes Cannon. It was a vote of 67 to 3, so
Okay.
pretty overwhelming vote. And
And
yeah,
why was
so
she important? Like, what did she do?
So she beat her husband in a Senate race, becoming the first state senator in the entire nation.
That's amazing.
No,
From
the
Utah.
first woman state senator in the entire country.
Yes,
I had
good
to have that
correction.
description in there.
Good. And what year was this?
No idea.
18 something. 19
No idea.
something.
19 something.
19 something.
Yeah. Utah was the first state where women actually voted.
Go Utah.
Yeah, Wyoming was the first state to grant women the right to vote. And that was like 3 weeks before Utah. But then Utah was the first one that had an election that they voted.
Oh, so we got that milestone in.
Take that, Wyoming.
That's right, Wyoming. Make Utah rectangular again. So also, I just peeked in, and the League of Women Voters is they're celebrating their 92nd something birthday today. So they were actually up here on the hill, and they had a birthday cake, which if you follow us on Instagram at Better Utah, you will see the beautiful picture of that birthday cake. And they're also talking about the ERA today, the Equal Rights Amendment. So it's like Women's Day up on the hill. All right. So anyway, let's just dive right into what we have, and hope our guest is coming over soon.
Okay.
So today we're talking, the title of this Better Utah broadcast is Bills, Bills, Bills.
Bills.
We are halfway through the legislative session, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Does it feel like we've been doing this for forever?
Yes.
Was there ever a time before the legislative session?
Yes.
Maybe. That's what they say. Oh, and by the way, sorry, before we jump in, I want to let you guys know, of course, we do this every Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Next week, Wednesday at 12:30, we will be interviewing Luis Garza from Comunidades Unidas. So stay tuned for that, and we're going to have various Utah movers and shakers on the show, along with Chase Thomas, our Policy and Advocacy Council. And of course, my name is Katie Matheson. I'm the Communications Director for Alliance for a Better Utah.
And behind the scenes is Kyle, our intern. So thank you, Kyle, for all that you do for the Better Utah broadcast.
That's right. Intern / producer / does everything awesome. Thanks, Kyle. And he's raising the roof now. Okay, so let's dive in.
Come over here and do the camera angles. And my phone might die eventually because it's not showing the battery percentage. So when this broadcast ends, it ends.
We live life on the edge.
So what are we going to talk about first?
Let's talk about HB 12. Something special happened today with HB 12.
Breaking news.
Wait, first tell us what
Actually, a
what
few
it is.
hours breaking news. HB 12 is a bill from Representative Ray Ford, who is one of the moderate Republicans from the Hill, and it would seek a Medicaid waiver from the federal government to provide family planning services and contraception services to low-income areas.
Awesome. So are these people who are not already covered by, so it's basically Medicaid expansion for that specific thing, right? So to
Yes.
cover people who are in the coverage.
Yeah, it's a Medicaid extension. It doesn't fall under the expansion plan. It's just another thing that the state is elected to do.
Right. Do you have any numbers in terms of how many families are not covered right now that this is covered? Do you know anything about that?
So this one would be under the existing Medicaid program, providing these services to them.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be tens of thousands of women who receive these services. So tens of thousands.
Good. And so what happened today? What's the breaking news?
So the bill passed the House a couple weeks ago. It's been making its way through the Senate, and it just passed the Senate in their first vote on the second reading calendar. So it has to go through another vote, which might be this afternoon or tomorrow.
So it's like a big day for women on the Hill.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Valentine's Day, Galentine's Day.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
great.
the Senate also passed a bill that creates a commemorative license plate for women.
Oh, that passed. When was that?
Did it? I think it passed. I guess I can check real fast, but that was in the Senate.
Oh, cool.
Are the mics still working? Someone said that it's hard to hear. Is the light still on?
Oh, is it on here?
Sorry guys, we're checking.
It says we're.
Can you? Who was it? Who asked?
Laura.
Laura. Hi, Laura. Can you hear me now, Laura?
Hello, hello, hello.
Is the light still on?
Yeah, the
Really?
light's on mine.
Huh.
And it says it's coming here, and it says it's going there.
That's strange.
Sorry, we'll try to project.
Yeah, just in case it is picking up over there, which it says it's still going through the mic. So turn up your volume.
And we'll use our music theater voices.
Yeah. So yeah, HB12 is gonna have one more vote, and then it should.
That's really exciting. Okay, good. So now let's talk about HB 205.
Okay.
What is this thing? Tell us about it. What have we done at Better Utah? And what is, I know ACLU of Utah has some things to say about it. So let's just tell us first of all, what is it?
HB 205 is a bill from Representative Ariana Mississippi, which would prohibit abortions, prohibit the performance of an abortion when the woman is seeking that abortion because she knows or has reason to believe that the fetus has Down syndrome.
Right. And is there a, for some reason I'm thinking 20 weeks. It's like in 20 weeks, or is that something different?
I think that's something.
That's something different. Okay. Okay, so walk us through the problems with this bill.
First off, it's limiting the right to an abortion, which should be the choice of a woman.
Well, not also just your personal opinion. I mean, don't we have wasn't there a court who said something about this?
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to go into next.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just as a personal morality belief, I think women should have the right to choose. Secondly, this has been upheld by courts. Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade said that there's a right to an abortion, and then later court decisions said that states can't place an undue burden on that right. And the Legislative Council advised the legislature for this.
Who's the legislative council? So that's the lawyers for the legislature. And they said what?
They advised the legislature that there is a high probability that this law would be declared unconstitutional. The legislature has so far ignored that council because it passed the House anyways. Decided said to go one step closer to a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. But yeah.
How often does the Legislative Council, how often do they put constitutional notes like that on bills?
Not very often.
Not very often, okay. So the fact that they even said anything about this bill is remarkable in and of itself.
Yeah,
Right.
It takes a lot to say that it's going to be a high probability.
Right. So we have some guests.
Hey.
Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Come
Hop on in.
Where should we
Please,
go?
right here.
You can also plug in headphones.
And we have two mics that we're passing around.
No, actually. Have you listened on that?
Intermission.
Can you hear
It's
it?
not. The mics aren't picking up. It doesn't
Who's
seem
this?
like anymore.
Well, then
It's
we're
the
going to have to go to
ACLU of
Navo
Utah.
then.
We always travel on a backpack.
That's right.
13 minutes.
That's great. Chase, can you give Marina your...
Apparently he's saying it's not working right now, so we switched to the mic, Mevo mic.
Oh, well, that's easy. All right. Speak up, everyone.
All right.
All right, so we have Marina Lowe from ACLU, right?
Yes.
Jason Groth, is that his name?
It's growth.
Groth. Jason Groth, and then Jason Stevenson.
We also share names and travel backpacks.
You guys are serious business. I'm feeling a little bit intimidated right now. That's fantastic. Okay, so ACLU of Utah is here to speak with us about good government, just like we were talking about before. So briefly, we had just discussed, well, first of all, we discussed Women on the Hill today because we have Martha apparently maybe Martha may be going to DC, which is excellent.
Yes.
And then the League of Women Voters had their birthday today, so they had a cake. And then HB 12, we heard, passed Senate.
It did. Well, it passed on the second reading calendar. Has one more vote.
And Chase is like, yeah, those lawyer arms. Right. Cool. All right, so we kind of discussed, we were talking about HB 205, so maybe you guys want to jump in with us. And we were just, in maybe a slightly snarky way, discussing the note on it that said it was likely unconstitutional. Do you guys have thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, the note was really clear, right? I mean, it said in no uncertain terms that if the legislature decides to pass this, it's likely to be struck down as unconstitutional. So, I think that is a cut and dry issue, really. There are other court cases that have been brought in other parts of the country challenging very similar provisions, and we feel very confident that the same would happen here in Utah.
Yeah. Was it Illinois who had a law very similar to this?
Indiana.
Indiana.
Yeah.
Those I words. Indiana. Yeah. And so what's going on with that bill right now?
Well, so a court struck it down. So that's a case that's directly on point, very similar language, and I think the same will happen here if this bill continues to move. The interesting thing is it's still stuck in rules right now over in the Senate. It hasn't moved for a little while, so that's interesting. Maybe we can hope that cooler heads prevail.
Yeah. I thought maybe they don't have an appetite for it. The sort of I don't know. Self-conceited part, which is it was that they're waiting for the Attorney General to come back with an actual estimate in response to our letter that we sent.
So tell them what is our letter? What did we send?
Oh, we sent a letter to the Attorney General asking him to provide an estimate of how much they would spend to defend this law.
Right.
Because legal fee cases are all out there, and usually it's multi-million dollars that they're requesting from the legislature to fight a law like this. Lawsuit against California, they wanted $2 million just through summary judgment. And so if it even goes on appeal, it could be more and more than that.
So it seems like a non-fiscally conservative choice to pass this bill.
Yeah.
Especially when you know with certainty that it will be challenged, and that there's already a court case out there saying it will be struck
And
down.
we know in Indiana that it's 6 figures already in legal costs, and that's just from the district court, and they're appealing to the circuit court one level higher, so that's potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars more. So you're biting off a big legal bill when you pass something like this.
Yeah, no kidding. So Chase took a selfie. I was so proud. He took a selfie of himself delivering this letter to the Attorney General's office, and we haven't heard back from them, but they liked the picture on Instagram.
Ooh.
So we're considering that official receipt of the letter.
Absolutely.
That's the way it works these days.
Yeah, that's it.
It's like when Amazon sends you a picture of your package on your doorstep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Kinda like
exactly
that.
what it is. Yeah, we'll consider it legally binding.
Yeah, well, today was the deadline, so we need to go check our mail and see if we've gotten anything.
Oh, that's going to be a big day.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then we also talked briefly about HB 12.
Yes.
So big stuff happened today with HB 12. Do you guys have an opinion on HB 12? What the deal is there?
Great piece of legislation. Really makes a ton of sense fiscally as opposed to the bill we just spoke about. For this percentage of women who fall into the gap, would provide reproductive care and coverage for them. Great 90-10 match with the federal government, so it makes a ton of sense for the state of Utah, really. We think it's a great bill. So far, it's been really well received. It was heard multiple times over the interim session. Passed all the way through the House, was heard, as you mentioned, on the Senate floor today, and passed out of, at least on the first vote. It'll be held now until the very end of the session once they deal with fiscal notes. But I think there's every reason to expect that it'll get another good vote.
Great. And in a state of family that calls itself family friendly, this totally makes sense to me. After I had my 2 kids, being able to have access to that family planning services after they were both born, it made sense. So it's great. So I'm hopeful that this will.
So really on that bill, the thing to keep an eye on is making sure that it gets funded. Right? So it's all well and good for it to pass out of every committee and get good votes on the floor, but at the end of the day, if the money's not appropriated, it doesn't mean much. So that's really where, if people want to get involved and want to make sure that their voice is being heard, it's encouraging their legislators to make sure that this gets a priority in terms of being funded.
Okay, so not just
And although
Today,
this
the
bill,
second phase of that starts, right, with executive appropriations.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
although this bill does cost money, it potentially saves money too, because getting birth control is a lot cheaper than covering a pregnancy and a delivery. So if you're allowing women to have birth control with pregnancies that are not going to happen, that would have been covered by Medicaid, covered by the state anyway, there's a built-in savings with that investment. So that's something not all bills have, but this one does.
Cool. All right, so now let's move on to HB 379, and I wasn't familiar with this one until I got an email from you. So what is this
This is an
about?
exciting
Tell us-
one.
yeah.
This is another bill that saves money.
Woohoo! We like saving money.
So this bill, this actually will, this is one of the few bills that we'll probably see this session that has a positive fiscal note. We don't have that fiscal note yet, but stay tuned. This is a bill to repeal the death penalty in the state of Utah. And the reason it'll have a positive fiscal note is because we spend a lot of money when we pursue capital cases in the state of Utah. There was actually just a study that came out from CCJJ, the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice, which says that we have spent in state and local money almost $40 million over 20 years to get 2 new death sentences. Now, those are not executions; those are just the death sentences. That's a lot of
Wait,
money.
40 million for 2?
40 million for 2.
Wow.
So
I did not know that.
think about how many potholes or schools or other things we could be doing with that sort of money.
Schools, families, children, like all these things that we could be doing. Wow, I did not know that. That's
It's an
So some of that
enormous number.
money would be going towards a lighter sentence, though, right? So like life imprisonment, but
Yes.
is it drastically
Yeah, so we
smaller
know
amount?
that's exactly right.
Okay.
And the reason that number is so big is because the state spends that money up front when a case is charged as a capital case. So they charge a case as a capital case, and immediately all the expenses expand, they blow up. And it may be that at the end of the day, the jury decides, no, life without parole. It doesn't matter. We've spent that money simply by charging it as a capital case. So that's the reason why it's really important that this legislation move forward and say we're no longer going to even charge cases as capital cases.
Wow, okay. So you guys are definitely in favor of this one.
We are. It's a big lift. It's a big change. But we see that across the country, here in the state of Utah as well, things are changing. People are deciding this isn't the right approach for a variety of reasons, fiscal reasons, concerns about executing the innocent, problems with our criminal justice system in general, the way that it might impact people of color differently than others. And so there are a lot of reasons to support this legislation.
Didn't the death penalty bill get pretty far in 2016?
We did. We got really, really close. We made it all the way through the Senate, through House committee, and then unfortunately on the last day of the session we just ran out of time. So we feel like maybe this is the year.
Wow, okay. So that's HB 379 for you guys at home. So call your legislators, ask them to support this bill. Awesome.
Thank you.
And then HB 330, so two-party recording law. So what's your stance on this?
This is a challenging situation for the ACLU.
The ACLU.
Sometimes we take positions on bills and on situations that surprise a lot of people, and that's good because it shows that at least the ACLU is trying to keep to some principles and maybe not wavering based on who is sponsoring a bill or what the prevailing mood is in the country. So HB 330 would make Utah into a two-party recording state. I think there's about 11 or 12 states that have that right now. Right now we're a one-party state, which means that if you're in a conversation with someone, you can record the conversation. And if you know, that's good enough. The other person doesn't have to know. The example that often comes up is the Krispy Kreme donuts example, where I forget who the gentleman was, but it was being recorded in the John Swallow investigation at a Krispy Kreme donut shop. And that recording kind of blew that story up and created the whole controversy over corruption in the AG's office. Under a two-party recording state law, that wouldn't have been possible. Now, the ACLU's position on this, though, is really firmly based in privacy. And that is that you should know if you are being recorded. That if you're in a meeting and someone is recording you and you don't know, that should be a violation of your privacy. And there's carve-outs within HB 330, which actually I should state is kind of in hibernation right now. The bill sponsors has gone back and said, you know what, a lot of opposition to this bill. A lot of people came out and said it's a really bad idea. I'm not going to pursue it. I'm going to go back and maybe we can create a smaller version of this bill to move forward. So it's currently not moving through the legislature. It's kind of hibernating. But the bill as introduced include carve-outs for whistleblowers who are witnessing illegal activity, abuse, harassment, a lot of situations where maybe someone felt in danger or felt like they were being extorted, where you could record someone with only you knowing and them not knowing. So we saw those carve-outs, those protections, as a way that it wasn't necessarily a bad bill, because we like the idea of how the privacy is being extended, and that's something ACO believes in. The reason we couldn't support it, the reason we remain neutral on it, which confused a lot of people, was because it does criminalize something that is currently right now legal, which is recording someone in a conversation. We don't like creating new laws, new penalties for behavior that previously had been legal to do. So, kind of on one side, kind of on the other, we decided to go right down the middle and say we're neutral on this bill. It's in hibernation right now. We'll have to see what kind of substitute or new version comes out before the end of the session, if one will. I think a lot of people also were opposed to the bill because of some of the supporters, which included the Chamber of Commerce and also the LDS Church. And that got a lot of people like, wait, what about the power dynamics of these conversations? What about the powerful using this to silence the powerless? We saw that a lot. We felt the carve-outs protected at least illegal behavior. And we'll have to see if there's any change in any new version of things out there.
Yeah. And I know, sorry, go.
Quick question on the exemptions. Were reporters included in that exemption?
I don't believe so.
No.
So
Okay.
unless it was like an illegal behavior, or the other one was reporting a public official or law
That was an
enforcement
Oh, that was the exemption.
in the course of their official business. So that was another carve out or exemption. So you could record a law enforcement officer, a police officer in the course of their duty. You could record a politician having a conversation or like a leader having a conversation with you. You didn't need to tell them that you were recording that. So in some cases that could help reporters do their job.
Yeah, that's funny business. Okay, so do we have any questions, Kyle? Anything? No? Okay. So then let's move on. So Campaign for Smart Justice, Justice Reform. So what is this? The Justice Reinvestment Initiative? Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. Well, there's actually two parts to that question, right? So the Campaign for Smart Justice is a nationwide campaign that the ACLU has. It hits all 50 states. The main goals of that campaign are de-incarceration by 50% and also to combat racial disparities in the system.
Is that nationwide?
Nationwide.
By what date?
And so it's kind of rolling out in different states at different times.
Okay.
So there's different tiers that they have looking at different impacts that they meet throughout the country. And so it just kind of depends on what the need is for a given state. And so here with the JRI, the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, that really kind of goes hand in hand with kind of the principles behind what the national campaign is trying to do, what we're trying to do here locally in Utah. So the JRI is a set of policies that were enacted in 2015 to reduce incarceration rates in Utah. One of the concerns was that even though felony arrests were going down nationally for the last 20 years since the 90s, was that there's actually an uptick in incarceration. That's nationwide. Here in Utah specifically, I believe from the dates of the study, I think about 2003 to 2014, they actually saw a rise in incarceration that was 6 times faster than the national average here in Utah.
Does that have anything to do with our population growth, or was that like in excess of population growth?
I'm not exactly sure if those are tightly tied together, but it seems that a lot of different factors come into play into the analysis. And so one of the ways to work with decarceration was actually just the policy that was in place. And so here, tracking the goals for the JRI, and it's only been implemented for 2 years, right? So we don't have a ton of data to look at, but the goals behind it and then the population decrease is actually on target for 2017. And so JRI has been doing a lot of really good things in that aspect. Interestingly though, there are some issues that we are still dealing with, which includes racial disparity, which is what our Smart Justice campaign is also tackling as well. For the new commitments from the implementation of 2015 and 2017 for minority populations, I believe it was held steady. I think the numbers are about 34%, is that right? Yeah, 34% new commitments for minority populations into the prison system. So that doesn't include parole violations, that doesn't include probation violations. These are essentially new crimes, new convictions coming in. That actually increased to 43%, 2017.
So the minority population percentage went higher.
Yes, even though that the other areas have been decreasing. And so there's a study in 2017 report that was released on the JRI and what it's been doing. And they're going to actually do a follow-up study to address this racial disparity and those issues there. And so those are some of the things that we're monitoring very closely when we think about the JRI and how it interacts with Smart Justice.
If I can cut in a little bit, I was going to ask if everyone could speak up a little bit. We've gotten quieter as it's gone on. So.
Oh yes, music theater voice. We're back. Wow. Okay. So then here's a kind of a question that's a huge loaded question, and maybe you can answer it. But what does actual good, effective, and humane criminal justice look like? Can you answer that in like a sentence? Do we have an example from the world? I know there are other countries who would do it differently than we do. What does that look like? I mean, just like maybe starting from like incarceration backwards or arrests forwards. Like, what does that look like? I don't even know.
Okay, so I'll tackle that in bits and pieces. Okay.
Sorry, I know that's really
maybe I
complicated.
give you the complete picture. But so I guess in relation to JRI, right? They try to prioritize the serious cases that are going to actually go into incarceration, and deprioritize nonviolent offenders, and also work on reentry programs. And
Work on, sorry, say that again?
reentry
Reentry
programs.
programs, okay.
So what's called like community corrections. A lot of people call that locally like halfway houses. So to get people back into the community, because when we look at reentry from prison, you're looking at rates 90 to 95% of that population that is incarcerated is going to be back in the community. And so working in ways to transition back into the community in meaningful ways are very helpful. And so on the back end, getting people back into the community is huge. On the front end, we also got to address how people are actually getting into the system and what does that look like. And so JRI was a good place to start policy-wise to get those outcomes where we want them to be. But we also need to look at all points of entry into the criminal justice system. And that includes from the very initial police contact and how officers use their discretion or how they police different communities. One of the concerns that we can look at nationally is that people of different races use drugs at about the same rate, same percentage, but we see highly disproportionate impacts, especially in Latino and African American communities. And so a lot of that has to do with policing practices, and also the next level we get to prosecutor and prosecutorial discretion. How you charge cases, what type of programs you make available or are available, such as drug court, veterans court, or diversion programs where you do some treatment, do some community service, and then it gets off your record. And so, big picture wise, that's a lot of what we can look at, not just when somebody's actually in the facility, but before and after.
Wow. Okay. So we have a long way to go. If you want to get involved with or learn more about this, the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, can they contact you?
They can.
Cool. All right. So we have to wrap up. We're out of time. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks for
so
having us.
Again, this is the ACLU of Utah. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Better Utah. How do we follow you guys?
We're on our Facebook page, which is ACLU Utah, and we also are doing a similar video series called ACLU on the Hill with Marina Love giving us updates every week. So we have those on our website, which is aclutah.org.
Perfect. Cool. And then subscribe to our emails. I assume you guys have emails, bill tracker, the whole shebang. Excellent. All right, and remember next week, 12:30 Wednesday, we will be here with Comunidades Unidas. And click Remind Me to get reminders when we go live. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.